Welcome back to another episode in our dissertation series. Today we have with us Constantinos, who's the sound editor at the podcast. Constantino, how are you doing today?
Hi guys, thank you for having me. I'm all right. What about you?
Yeah, we're doing fine.
Oh, good, thanks.
So today we're discussing about your experience doing your dissertation and the content of your dissertation. So let me start the interview by just asking, what was your dissertation on?
Okay, so my dissertation was on a technical topic that has to do with theoretical physics. It was an argument imported from epistemology to a conversation that sprang up from special relativity, philosophy of physics kind of stuff. I'm not going to go into too much detail.
Right. So what was your argument? I mean, what were you saying? Because I'm in third year, if anybody hasn't heard that already. And I'm gonna do a dissertation next year. And I've been told that what you should do is you should find an argument, say somebody said this, then somebody said that to this, and then somebody said that to what the other two said, and then I'm saying this final thing, and that's it. So what was that series of connections for you?
Okay, so the topic is very peculiar. I didn't follow that kind of route because of how weird the topic is. So the idea is that, okay, I'm going to go into some detail. In 1905, Einstein released this paper on the electrodynamics of moving bodies. Mm-hmm. And in it, the conclusion was that, simultaneity is relative, right? That's the special relativity theory, right?
Right.
And it was such a big thing, and it was just a groundbreaking kind of theory that most people ignored that in the beginning of the paper, he made an even more preposterous kind of claim that simultaneity is conventional, like it's by convention that we choose it. And so because of that, there wasn't that much literature on it, especially modern, let's say. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that it was kind of settled. So there's this thing called conventionalism, which is a more general idea. But when it comes to simultaneity, is the argument that simultaneity is conventional, right? Whatever that means.
Before we continue, I think, because we're getting into some detail.
Okay.
Can you explain very briefly and very simply what simultaneity is?
Simultaneity is when two events are simultaneous, like it's the noun of, the two events being simultaneous, right?
Okay.
Einstein said it's relative because of, some things. It's not too hard to understand, but think about it this way. If you're standing on a train platform, right, and there's two poles, right, there's two gates, let's say, of the platform, right, the entrance and the exit. And this lightning strike, let's say, there's two lightning strikes that are simultaneous to you because they hit the poles at the same time. You are standing exactly at the midpoint between them. Light takes the same amount of time to travel to you. Those events are simultaneous, right?
Right.
Now, if there was a guy on the train that was traveling very close to the speed of light and it was traveling from one direction to the other, he would see one of them first because he's traveling towards it rather than the other one, right? Light needs to cover less distance to, from one side, right? So for him, those two events were not going to be simultaneous, right? Okay. So that's the relativity of simultaneity part. You need two frames of reference. You need me standing on the platform, and you need you to be on the train. That's two frames of reference, right? But before you get that, you have, within a single frame of reference, you need to, in a sense, synchronize two clocks that are at a distance from each other, right? So let's say from here to Mars, we need to synchronize a clock, right?
Okay.
And let's say light needs 10 minutes to travel from Earth to Mars. Let's say it's not really true, but we're just going to put Mars rather than A and B. It's easier if it's written. It's easier to say A and B and TA and TB and T2 and T1 and all these things.
I mean, we're kind of just like a bracket to this because it's really interesting. How many T1s and A and Bs did you have in your dissertation?
There were a lot. And this is, I mean, tip number one kind of thing, right? If you want to do anything that involves maths or physics or any other kind of science, it's okay to have diagrams. It's okay to have graphs. It's okay to have lots of equations in your dissertation. It's fine. Like, it just has to be philosophical enough. And the argument that I was making was philosophical, right? I wasn't like proposing a new theorem in physics, right? I'm not a physicist, right? But as long as the argument is that, is philosophical enough, then it doesn't matter if instead of a paragraph of an argument, you're using an equation as an argument. Instead of a premise, it's an equation in a sense. It's the same thing, right? But what I was going to say about Earth and Mars is like, we have two clocks, right? I'm sending a signal from one side to the other, from A to B, from Earth to Mars. And I know that it takes 20 minutes to come back, right? There's a mirror there, and there's another clock with the scientists there. And they're all programmed, they all know what to do, right? I'm going to send these at 12, at 12:00. I'm going to send a light signal, and I'm going to say that this was sent at 12:00. Scientists there, they're going to receive it. It's going to be reflected instantly, and instantly they're going to set their clock at 12:10 because they know, that it takes 20 minutes to come back. It must take 10 minutes to go, right? And then it's going to arrive back at 12:20, and everything is fine. Now, Einstein is going to say that there was a hidden step there that I said, the midpoint, right? The temporal midpoint. The fact that if it takes 20 minutes for light to go there and come back, that's what it's called, the two-way speed of light. We know the two-way speed of light, and we just half the time, and we say that that's the time that it took from Earth to Mars.
Right.
Because it has to be equal from Earth to Mars and from Mars to Earth. How could it be different? Right? And Einstein literally just said, well, yeah, we cannot prove this, so we're just postulating. We're postulating it, right?
We're postulating that the temporal midpoint is half.
I mean, that it is the midpoint that we care about.
Oh, okay. Right.
We're postulating. We cannot know epistemological claim, right? Mm-hmm. We cannot know, and it doesn't even make sense. Einstein was going to say from a physics perspective, to talk about the universal kind of time, right?
Right.
There's an A time and there's a B time. There's an Earth time, there's a Mars time, right? And the only way to make, for us to make sense, to synchronize these clocks, mm-hmm. is to postulate, to come and say by convention that the time that light takes to go one way is the same as the time that light takes to go the other way. And that seems like an unshakable fact somehow.
I just got it. Okay.
Despite the fact that it's so ridiculous, right? It doesn't make it like, how can it be, right?
How can you be postulating time?
So it could be that light's traveling from Mars to Earth quicker,
faster, or slower
back to Mars, but actually,
and you wouldn't know the difference, right? That's the conventionalist claim. The conventionalist claim is that when it comes to our experiences, is that if light, if light was non-isotropic, as it's called, right? Isotropy means the same in all directions, right? No matter where you're facing, it's the same. So if the speed of light was not isotropic, we wouldn't know the difference, right? And I call this the saving words, right? The non-isotropic speed of light thesis, NISLT, right? So there's quite a lot of abbreviations if the symbols and the numbers and the graphs were not enough, right? So that's the non-isotropic speed of light hypothesis, which sounds ridiculous, but it seems to be unprovable. You can't prove that it's wrong in a sense, because by definition, your experiences were going to be the same. Mm-hmm. And there is the common sense kind of thesis that I call the isotropic speed of light thesis, the ISLT, that says that light takes the same amount of time, that universe doesn't have a gradient, right? There's no downhill and uphill when it comes to the universe, right? That's the kind of claim.
But so you're saying this is unprovable, and I get why it's unprovable.
It's unprovable one way or another, and the reason why there's a philosopher of physics called Reichenbach, and he formulated it in the most succinct way possible, right? It's basically a vicious cycle, right? In order to synchronize two distant clocks, you need a velocity, you need the one-way speed of light. But in order to measure the one-way speed of light, you need synchronized clocks to know that it indeed takes this much time to go there. And, because you can only know the two-way speed of light, right? And you can't communicate between A and B because they're so distant that you need light to communicate. So again, you can never know any of these things. And that's a very shaky foundation for physics. And this is where diagrams were helpful actually for the dissertation. Yeah. So I made a diagram. I'm not going to share the screen. Okay, whatever. We're not going to go into that stuff, right? Like too many details already, right? There's more important things to talk about. But like there's diagrams, right? Where it's like there's lines that, time goes up, let's say, vertically, right? So there's 12, 12, 10, 12, 20, etc., right? And there's A and B. And then it could go like that, where you form an isosceles triangle because the time it takes is the same. But the other scenario, and I posited a very extreme scenario just to show how ridiculous this is. What if light traveled at half the speed we think it did? So instead of 10 minutes to go, it needed 20 minutes to go. And it had infinite speed on the way back. So actually, instead of, if it leaves at 12 and it arrives at 12:10 and it comes back at 12:20, instead of that, which is what we assume would happen under normal conditions, what if it took 20 minutes to go and 0 to come back, right? You wouldn't know the difference, right? That's the whole point. So what I always say that essays and stories are quite similar, right? You need to kind of build up some tension in a sense, right? And that's what we do in the introduction, right? I'm going to try to prove this point to you. And by the end of the dissertation, by the end of the essay, even in normal shorter essays, right? I'm going to convince you, the reader, the marker, that I'm right, in a sense, right? That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Stories are kind of similar, right? I'm going to put my protagonist in a very bad situation. And by the end, I promise you that they're either going to, I'm going to, basically, I do setups and I promise you that they're going to be paid off, right? Well, in my dissertation, I introduced the villain in a sense, which seems this unshakable fact. And it is the way it is. We can't know, right? Either way or another. So the conventionalist is going to say, for all we know, things could have been otherwise. Or things could now be like this. Not could have been, could be. And when I was reading this back in the day, because this was like by my own kind of research, right? Obviously, we didn't do a course on this, right? I couldn't help but make the connection with skepticism, basically. This is my essay. This is my actual dissertation, right? Because the idea is that you cannot prove that you're not a brain in a vat, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you are, but for all we know, you could be, right? That's skepticism. That's the typical brain in a vat hypothesis, right? And there's this guy, Michael Huemer, Huemer, I don't know how to pronounce it properly, that did a kind of probabilistic Bayesian argument. There's this guy called Bayes, who did like theorem on probabilities. He used this kind of argument to basically say why you're most probably not a brain in a vat, right? We can't prove, with a normal deductive argument. People tried, and it doesn't really work because by definition, by design, it's supposed to be, unprovable one way or another. And so I imported his argument against skepticism to this conversation, right? So if we're going to build up to finally, now I'm going to reveal the title, whatever, in a sense, it's like a Bayesian argument against the one, the non-isotropic speed of light, right?
Okay.
Why the speed of light is most probably isotropic rather than non-isotropic.
What
right?
we assume it to be, right?
Yeah,
now.
exactly. So it's like I set up the villain, I set up the very peculiar situation, and by the end, my conclusion was that we can live our lives normally, we can do scientific experiments normally. So it's like, all is back at all is back at normalcy, let's say, kind of thing, right? But yeah, it was quite technical, and it seems like very, I chose a very weird topic, and a topic that I shouldn't have chosen, right? Because the tips that they tell us, and I would gladly repeat that tip, is like, go back to what you've studied so far, especially for you, right? I mean, your deadline is now, right? It's like
I have to
3 weeks or
decide
something.
like a month.
Okay.
Not even a month. It was a month when they sent the email. Now it's
15th
like,
of July, right?
Yeah, 15th of July, 20 days.
Okay, that's fair. Well, yeah, okay. I mean, ideally you would want to have a topic by now, but oh my God.
No, I mean,
Okay.
I'm just lost at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you thinking? Let's turn it into like a therapy.
Yeah, let's do a therapy session of me. I have no idea, because
Lay down.
I mean, my bed is like right here. I could just like set it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know.
Is there like a topic? Think of it the other way. Think of it like exam questions, right? Is there a topic you know for sure you don't want to do it on, other than philosophy of physics, obviously?
I mean, I could do it on philosophy of physics, but I just haven't had enough. I mean, this is what my biggest problem with this is the following. I don't feel like if I've had enough friction with any subject within philosophy to know and contribute to a field.
Okay, that's fair. And I had the same thing. I think you don't make it, obviously this is such a weird thing. I'm the sound editor, so I've I know what the previous interviews have been, right? Even if people, obviously the episodes are not out yet at the time of this recording. This doesn't need to be a life-changing thing for you or for philosophy, right? It has to be a contribution ideally, right? But contributions can be very minor, right? Can still be a contribution, right? I don't think what I said like changes anything in a sense, right? I mean, by definition, I say things should be back to normal, right? But it's still like it's supposed to show that you said you didn't have friction, but I don't believe that, right? Like you've written essays on many topics, right? And the best strategy, which again I didn't follow because of how I already knew the subject, right? So I kind of wanted to say something about that. It was like personal reasons, let's say. But overall, when you're going to start, you should be kind of, while you're writing essays now, obviously it's too late, let's say, but maybe for Jonah, right? While you encounter this topic, right? And in the topic, let's say you're going to do, maybe not in first year, right? But you're going to do, let's say you're going to read like 20 plus articles sometimes, right? Just because you got sucked in this kind of, vortex of this black hole of like there's information and like, oh my God, this looks cool. Let me read about that. And then you read it and you're like, this is amazing, but then I can't really use it in the essay, right? So you just put it in a folder somewhere, or you even delete it if you're not thinking of the future that much, as I do. And that's it. You forget about it, right? Well, now it's the time to kind of go back on those kind of topics and on those chapters, or chapters from books or articles or whatever it is, right? And see, like, I was interested at this. I kind of had something to say about this, right? But at the time, my priority was this essay question given to me by somebody else that I had to answer. So the idea is that now you go back to those ones that were low priority at the time because they were irrelevant to your question. And now, because you make your own question, right? You can choose whatever it is, right? So you go there and you're like, okay, can I make anything out of this? Right? You read a paper, you skim, you don't have to fully read again, right? Depending on the, on the timing of the situation, right? But the idea is that you go, you skim, you familiarize yourself again with what the thesis is. Now, maybe some time passed, right? Maybe it was from second year, and now you're at the end of your third, or at some point in your third year, let's say, and you're starting to think about the dissertation, and you're gonna say, okay, let me read it now in a more mature kind of way, right? So yeah, that time you saw it, and it was the first time you saw it, and you were worrying about the other essay. Now you can go back and read it just for the sake of that paper, right? Without that essay in mind, without any other priorities in mind, without any other already, you've let's say when you first read it, you've already made some kind of roadmap of where you want that topic to go, right? Because the question was limiting, the word count was limiting, the time was limiting, etc., right? You had other deadlines, etc., right? I'm not going to say it was the day before the thing, right? Anyway, but now you have like a year, especially if you do it in March, right? You have almost a year, maybe not right now, until the time this is going to be due, right? So you have lots of time to think and develop and, change the topic halfway through. It's fine, right? The specific topic. But the general area, the roadmap, you can make your own, right? So you read a paper for what it is, and you're not going to do this once. You're going to do this with this paper in epistemology, in this part of epistemology. And then you're going to check, in week 3 of epistemology, not of week 8, I also read this other paper, right? Let's see there. And then I also did, I don't know, metaphysics, right? I don't remember what we did in the third year. Philosophy of mind, stuff like that, right? Yeah. So there's quite a lot of stuff to see. So if you go and read papers from this week on this course and this week on this course, and you just skim them, you write a couple of keyword searches on the library, or, conventionality of simultaneity, right? Bayesian argument, like stuff like that, right? To see like what kind of papers are there on these. So, there's obviously read stuff that you've done already. And that's why I think it's in the official tips as well, right? Because it's very useful. When I didn't, at the beginning, when I started thinking about this, I was like, I have no idea. What can I write on, right? There's lots of stuff in metaphysics, in epistemology that I was doing that I would want to write on. And I was like, let me go back and read it. Let me reread those papers. And there's lots of stuff to say, right? I could have done any of them. Again, like I chose something, very different, right? But I think it is a sound strategy.
Let me ask you a question that can give us another tip. So it has two parts. The first part is, how did you find formulating the question? How easy was that, or how did you go about doing that? And secondly, was the supervisor that you had helpful or in any way in the formulation of your essay question or like dissertation question, and in any other way that is noteworthy?
Yeah, no, totally helpful. So the idea is that I knew that, my original insight is that, right? It's a very peculiar, not non-traditional argument in epistemology against skepticism. And I thought that kind of could be useful in my topic, right?
Yeah.
I talked to Stefan Leuenberger, but then he was going to be my supervisor, but then he wasn't because of different semesters. It couldn't work. I had Brian Pickel, so weird. You never talk to somebody about their surname, right?
Yeah.
He was insanely helpful, right? So the idea is that I didn't know, I knew that I wanted to talk about something like that, right? I was already being, it was shaping a bit better with Stefan, and then with Brian, we kind of honed in, right? Like we texted a bit over summer because it was last minute, I think like a week before the deadline. And I realized that I thought I was going to do my dissertation in December, but then it didn't work out because I wouldn't have enough courses that I would want to do in second semester. So I kind of switched around, right? There were more courses than I wanted to do in first semester, right?
Okay.
And we switched. I talked a bit with Brian, like for I don't know, like a couple of days. We exchanged a couple of emails. He didn't change the topic at the time. I was like, I already, any kind of pre-submission form kind of thing, or pre-proposal or whatever we call it, the thing that you have in July, any work that was going to be done before that was kind of already done. So I just did that. I put him as the supervisor I wanted, and obviously nobody does a course like that, right? Or like a topic like that. He does quite a lot of philosophy of science and stuff like that, and metaphysics. So I got him, right? And then at some point, I think in December, maybe he had other people who were doing dissertations before, whatever it is, we started meeting, and you couldn't be more right. Like the supervisor is there, again, speaking as an editor who has seen some other conversations in the other episodes, right? There's obviously it's called the pastoral kind of role, right? They're there to help you with any kind of personal problems that you might have, whether they're mental health related or just, I'm kind of stuck and I don't know where to take this now,
right.
Or I don't, something is not really working with my research or anything like that, right? There's obviously that kind of help that has to do, again, with more personal, let's say, issues. But there's also the academic help, right? That is like immensely important, let's say, right? Because for me, I kind of had a lot of things right. I knew roughly what I wanted to do, right? But there were so many small mistakes that I could have done, and they would have led me into days of research or of writing that would be worthless, or even an essay that by the end, no matter how original and cool it wasn't as tight, and it wasn't as and it wasn't in the right direction where it needed to be, in a sense, right? He told me to change the argument, in a sense. The argument was the same, the structure was the same, but I was kind of going to argue more against conventionalism rather than the non-isotropic speed of light hypothesis, right? And he was like, if you do that, there's other things that you're going to need to do that you're not saying that you're going to do now. So either, basically what I thought the dissertation was going to be was not what I was saying it was going to be, right? And that tension would have resulted in failure, maybe not in the, failure in a very bad grade, but like maybe both that and definitely in all the additional stress and the wasted, in a sense, hours and days of research and writing, something that is not where you wanted to take it, right? And he steered me off that, right? And many other, obviously we're not going to go too much into this. I don't even remember exactly what points, you know what I mean? But we had regular meetings through Zoom, given the situation, right? Via Zoom, sorry, given the situation this year. But it was very helpful, and it was like exactly what it needed to be. You know what I mean? And I'm really glad for it, and I really like my dissertation as it is, because that's kind of what I was imagining it, without the details, obviously, but that's what I was imagining it this time last year, right? And I was going to take it somewhere else by accident, kind of thing, right? Sleep driving, and somebody fixed the wheel. But yeah, that's supervisor is like the most valuable asset, because think about it, right? We've written many essays. Sure, they're shorter, but whatever, right? But the biggest difference is not the fact that instead of 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 or 2.5 or 3,000, it's 6 to 8 or whatever the limit is, right? It's not that. It's the fact that you have a supervisor. You know what I mean? I felt very weird because, well, I don't know exactly what the rules are. I don't think it's that clear, and we could push them to kind of make it a bit more clear. What are they supposed to read, right? What is the supervisor supposed to read, right? Because we were reading, obviously, sources, thoughts. I made a plan and we went over it together, and et cetera, right? But then about the actual dissertation, we didn't know exactly how much, right, it was supposed to read. So I wrote the introduction, right? And the way I write essays is that I cannot write an essay without an introduction, right? It's kind of the opposite of, that they say, right? I find that, basically I'm going to make a plan. The plan translates into the introduction is just a plan in words, in more words.
I get that.
And the essay is just the introduction unpacked, right? Because the introduction is going to say, this is what I'm going to argue. Okay, that doesn't count. I'm going to start with this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. And by the end, this is going to be the conclusion. So the actual essay, no matter how long it is just the first sentence of the introduction, apart from the restatement of the question, right? The first sentence is going to be the first section, let's say, or paragraph, or depending on the length. And then the next, it goes like that, right? So I knew that I needed to write a good introduction, and then he read it, basically. We read it together, and he was like, yeah, that's perfect. Okay, he still gave comments, but whatever, right? Like, it wasn't, oh my God, like, change all of it, this is bad, right? But that was it, right? And after that, I didn't need him, in a sense, because I had all his help baked in the process of the planning and the research that I had already done and the written introduction. And after that, it was just me writing the essay, right?
Yeah.
So that was it, right? We didn't have that many meetings. Thankfully, I wasn't in a bad place. I was quite organized from the beginning. I started working quite early because I thought it was going to be in December. So I was more stressed in the last meeting that I had done something wrong, because it felt very easy, in a sense. Right. But that's because I was already working more than a year before, because I had in mind it was going to be that the deadline was going to be 3 months before when it actually was, before the time when it actually was, right? So it was quite smooth sailing when it comes to that. But again, like,
it's good to hear that there's good cases like this. There's good stuff as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to refine it, you're basically saying that the supervisors are so helpful if you can use them to set out the roadmap of where you want to go, and then because then all you have to do is just do the journey yourself. And
exactly. And it's like the roadmap for where the essay is going to go. It was with Brian, right? It was with the help of him, right? With his help of him. But by the end, because it was so closely following it and using as much as possible his insights and his arguments and feedback and conversation, which is very helpful. And again, it's the biggest difference from any other essay we've written. And it's actually in our favor rather than against it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, I think that's everything, isn't it? Constantinos, thanks so much for telling us about your dissertation. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe. All the information and stuff that we've talked about is going to be in the description. And yeah, we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.